new study finds a link between violent games and aggressive behavior in children.
People have been saying this for about 20 years. Since video games started having gore and blood in the 90s, people have been saying, well, what's that going to do to the young people who are playing this?
According to the most comprehensive statistical analysis yet conducted, violent video games increase aggressive behavior as much as lead exposure decreases children's IQ scores.
We must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace. It is too easy today for troubled youth to surround themselves with a culture that celebrates violence. We must stop or substantially reduce this, and it has to begin immediately.
Violent video games and their effect on children have always been a prevalent mainstay in the news. But after a while, one must have to ask, how are kids getting a hold of these violent video games to begin with? Video games have always been a heavy topic when it came to violence. One of the earliest cases can be found in 1976. The arcade game Death Race was released, in which a player would try to run over as many human-looking gremlins as possible in a limited time frame. This sparked quite a bit of controversy, but by the end of 1977, people had mostly forgotten about it, and no action was taken. But this problem only got worse with time. As graphics in video games improved, kids were no longer just killing pixels on a screen, but rather pixels that looked eerily human instead. This is Mortal Kombat, an arcade machine released in 1992. It didn't really make headlines until it was ported over to home consoles and people could play it at home. This made massive waves in the media, because sure, you can stop a kid from playing on an arcade machine, but now, any kid could go to the store and buy Mortal Kombat and play it at home, because there just weren't any regulations surrounding video games at the time. After 5 months of controversy, the Entertainment Software Rating Board, also known as the ESRB, was established. The ESRB's job was to assign age ratings to video games, and they almost immediately gave Mortal Kombat a mature rating, meaning that they had to put a disclaimer on the box and made it so that no one under 18 could buy it by themselves. Mortal Kombat wasn't the most violent game ever released, but it was more so the straw that broke the camel's back. The violence controversy mostly cooled down after the establishment of the ESRB, and new video games were being released. Games like Wolfenstein 3D, where the objective was to kill hordes of Nazis. Wolfenstein didn't catch much controversy because, even though you were killing humans, they're Nazis. Then games like Doom, which caused quite a bit of controversy for its satanic imagery and gore. But where do we draw the line? When is killing excessively violent, and when is it justified because the bad guys are evil? Politicians and game developers were thinking of questions like these when tragedy struck. And in 1999, 2 high school boys shot 13 victims in Columbine, Colorado. The parents of the killers bore most of the blame, as can be seen in the Colorado Independent. Polls showed 85% of Americans figured bad parenting caused Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold to kill a dozen students and a teacher. But this didn't stop video games from taking part of the blame, as both of the high schoolers frequently played games like Doom. Now Doom was picking up more outrage from religious groups and parents than ever. In fact, the outrage was so large that the president at the time, Bill Clinton, ordered an investigation into the correlation of school shootings and video games. The report was released to the public in 2004 and found that only 12% or 1/8 of school shooters had shown any interest into violent video games. But how can this be? It seemed so obvious that there would be a direct link. Well, if we come to the present, we can find studies like this one from Western Michigan University, which found that seeing or hearing violence in the home and experiencing violence in the home were also powerful predicators. So home life seems to matter more than just playing violent video games. So we know that video games aren't one of the main reasons for school shootings, but do video games cause violence in children? Well, if we can take a look, there's studies like this one from Cleveland State University, which claims that even 20 minutes of playing violent video games can slightly desensitize you to violence. But this is strange, because in other studies like this one from the National Center for Biotechnology Information, they found no link between violent video games and lack of empathy, aka desensitization. I bring up desensitization here because studies have shown that desensitization leads to violence. So all these different trusted sources are telling you very different results. So what do? Unfortunately, there is no clear definitive answer. I personally believe that violent video games could have a negative impact on children. But what we have to understand is that when we're talking about violent video games and children, is that a lot of the games that parents are worried about aren't meant for children in the first place. These games have age ratings on the back and the front of the box, telling you what age demographic it's appropriate for and why. There are reasons as to why children can't buy these games by themselves. Should parents be worried about the effect of violent video games on their children when those kids shouldn't be playing the video game in the first place? The biggest problem that the video game medium faces right now is respect. A lot of parents don't bother to check whether a video game is appropriate for their child because it's a video game. And most parents follow the age ratings on films, so they aren't nearly as worried about them as they are video games. This can be shown in this survey from childcare.co.uk, which found that from a sample size of 2,000 parents, 86% of them don't follow age restrictions on video games, compared to 23% who said that they don't follow age restrictions on films. What I'm saying is that almost all media will affect a child in one way or another, positively or negatively. So of course when you plop down media that is meant for adults in front of children, whether that be TV shows, movies, or video games, the results could be negative. My final message, and what I want to end this off with, is that violent video games don't really impact children as much as poor parenting does.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away. Oh, oh, oh. Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est?